Hi, everyone. It's John Chrastka at EveryLibrary and the EveryLibrary Institute. Thanks for joining me today for another of our Utah State Library training series. This one is on building better local relationships. I'm going to take you through some theory around how people can interact with other people on a professional basis, to talk about some of the big ideas, talk about our value system as libraries, our mission and our vision as institutions. I want to spend a little time thinking through with you good ways to maybe break through with people that you've had hard times talking to before, and also how to think through making first contact with somebody that runs another part of society in your neck of the woods. The learnings here are both political when it comes to the way that libraries get funded, they're practical when it comes to programmatic alignments, as well as tactical, I think, when it comes to talking to funders and other kinds of partners. So very happy to be with you today. I'm going to take a moment, turn my video off, get out of your way so we can get into this together. Again, EveryLibrary and the EveryLibrary Institute, the two organizations I run. EveryLibrary is a political action committee for libraries. We are set up to do political work in many other states. We do ballot initiatives, negotiations with city councils and county governments, support for state library associations and their legislative agendas. And then our nonprofit side, our C3 side, which is where this training program lives. We work as a public policy, tax policy, education policy think tank. We spend a lot of time doing research as well as public policy development and training programs like this. We also do work across both organizations on talking to the American public every day about library-shaped solutions to problems and librarian-enacted solutions. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is rooted in the coalition work that we need to do as a multi-state national organization, and the supports that we've been providing very tactically and strategically to our partners at the local level in different campaigns as well. So I want to spend the first part of this session with you talking about a very smart person and some of the things that our friend and colleague Ken Haycock has taught us over the years. I include a longer biography of Ken at the end of this slide deck. But Ken was the dean at University of Southern California. He was the dean of another high school that the name just went out of my head. Ken has written extensively on a number of issues around advocacy, done foundational research in this space, and has been active for, oh gosh, almost his entire professional life on making sure that libraries can connect with the funders and the power players in local communities at the state and provincial level as well. Ken has a certain set of rules for advocacy, not litmus test rules, but how do we behave? How do we frame? How do we think through getting prepared to have good conversations about these big ideas that is usually funded with either public money or significant donor engagement? His main thesis is that respect is the key driver for any of these kinds of relationship building, building better connections, conversations, and that it's about connecting agendas rather than advancing your own point of view. I've learned a lot from Ken over the years. One of his key rules of advocacy is that mutual respect is at the core of any of these conversations. His rule of advocacy includes recognizing that the target warrants respect. And when he says target here, he means the object of our affection, whether they know that we love working with them or not yet. The target makes their own decisions for their own reasons, not ours. And the most effective advocacy is about connecting agendas. In fact, I've taken this to heart over the years. And one of the things I like to say, and I might even say it in a little later slide, is that when you connect agendas, when you are working in coalition, the best part about that is that it makes your agenda somebody else's. Your agenda will be advanced by supporting your request. Advocacy is like banking. You cannot make withdrawals if you've never had any deposits. Folks, the core of this conversation about building better relationships and making stronger connections is fundamentally about working with people to establish a baseline of mutual respect, of professional encouragement before you need it, before you have to go out and start asking for things, before you have to have anybody make a decision about whether or not they want to stand up alongside you. Now, this is all pre-need, these kinds of conversations, but I like the framework very much about that the respect that is necessary. These are people, when we talk about the library's mission, vision, and values, these are people who run complementary organizations. They run agencies that are at the same level of government as we are. They run stakeholder groups. They organize our society. In this concept that they deserve our respect and that we demand their respect back, I think it's very important when it comes to having true co-creation conversations in this advocacy framework. Another one of Ken's rules is that people, human beings, those folks who are out there, people pay attention to the things that they love and they value. And what Ken Haycock is suggesting here is that we need to really deeply reimagine, maybe turn it 90 degrees, maybe 180 degrees, how we are trying to talk about ourselves, because we tend to prepare communications, and we've talked about this in other webinars. We tend to prepare communications that are asking people to do something either with us, like attend a program, get a thing, check out a book, or for us, which is advocacy or activism in order to fix a problem or to help extend our success. But communications in the Haycock rule need to be prepared not with our interests in mind, but with the interests of the people that we're talking to. What do they love? What do they value? Every time we prepare a communication without regard to its potential audience and their needs, we are essentially asking people to pay attention to the things that we love and value. There's a humbling moment to considering this, especially when I think about the work that we're trying to do as a multi-state national organization for libraries. We sometimes talk about ourselves, we have to. But when we try and root our conversations with the American public, with potential funders, with potential allies, is where is our common cause or our common concern? And I want to be able to reflect back with you as this webinar progresses, this session progresses, about how to get into their heads a little bit and understand a little bit more about what they do love. Another rule of Ken Haycock's is that to build influence, you need to use evidence and connect your agendas. Again, it's values, vision, and mission. That better communications, better local relationships happen because, well, if you just tell people what we do at the library, they've already heard it before and they haven't shown up already. We have to be able to describe to our audience what our values are that are common, our vision that's in kind, our mission that's aligned, in order to get the results that we would like to get. This is not manipulative, this is truth-telling, but in a way that is not exclusively from your own perspective. It's understanding, thinking through, and I've got some worksheets coming up for you about how to do that properly, thinking through where those points of intersections are and tailoring your message accordingly. Another Haycock rule, and I got a lot of them tonight because I have a tremendous amount of respect for Ken Haycock here, and he's taught me a lot. This rule is very interesting to me, and it's something that I have to spend a little bit more time with from time to time in order to really embody it. But his basic observation is one that I think he gleaned fundamentally. He might tell you this if you talk to him in a casual conversation, that he gleaned from Carnegie, Dale Carnegie, not Andrew. Dale Carnegie with the How to Win Friends and Influence People. A does stuff for Z because A wants Z to like them. Again, this is not a manipulation situation. This is a bit of human nature. John in this case, let's call him John instead of me. John does stuff for Patrick, not only because John likes Patrick. So that's important. John does like Patrick. I'll do stuff for Patrick. I like the guy. But because John in this case also knows that if he doesn't help Patrick, then Patrick may not like him as much. The idea that we are in a mutually beneficial set of relationships rather than a one-sided one does have this side to it. It is important to understand when we're talking from the library's perspective why humans do things for other humans. People like to work with people they like, and to be likable, folks, to be in a position where maybe it is like, maybe it is respect, but one way or another. To be in that kind of relationship environment also means that you have to reciprocate. I think my final Haycock rule is one of the more significant ones. An advocate says to decision makers, potential partners, funders, or stakeholders, your agenda, the decision makers or partner or funder or stakeholders agenda, will be greatly assisted by what we have to offer at the library. Not from a services perspective, but from a resource perspective or a policy perspective. It's not a situation where we're there to serve. It's a situation where we are there to co-create. Putting your agenda together with their agenda breeds more success. Coalitions, as I mentioned earlier, allow you to advance your agenda by making it part of someone else's agenda. This is an extremely important difference between programmatic partnerships and working on either policy or funding together with another organization, agency, stakeholder group, or groups of them. The agenda, your agenda on the other side of this conversation, as we move through these better conversations, these better relationships will be greatly assisted by what we here at the library have to offer. All right, so how do we put some of these rules of Mr. Haycock's together? And I think it's an important one to spend a little time understanding about prep work. If you're out looking to have big conversations, to have better, stronger relationships, to have more authentic professional relationships with the other folks who run organizations, staff agencies, are themselves key stakeholders in society, we have to be prepared to succeed in these conversations. Yes, there's the occasional meet cute. Yes, there's the occasional bit of kismet. But fundamentally, we have to work on these kinds of relationships. Otherwise, they will not thrive. The philosophy of networking that I want to bring to this conversation here is that politics is fundamentally the space that we're working in when it is not programmatic, because politics fundamentally drives our decisions about how do we tax ourselves, how do we put a small amount of smart taxpayer money to work. And politics is fundamentally a relationship-based business. The political librarian is a term of art that we've been using, not only to name our professional journal at the EveryLibrary Institute. The political librarian, we talk about public policy and tax policy issues, but it's also a descriptor of the nature of the work whenever there is funding on the line, whenever there is new authority to act on the line. Politics is a relationship business. Your Facebook ads, despite how great they can be after some of the other webinars that we've been doing together, and you can improve the kind of work that you're doing, they don't move the marketplace of ideas by themselves. Within the professional relationships around your community, the communications philosophy that I'm describing here will help tremendously. It is a prerequisite for you to leave your building to go hang out with other folks, perhaps at their building or perhaps at neutral grounds. But building relationships and connections, those open lines of communications, is where power is built for your institution, for your job. And people will flow from it. One of the interesting things about libraries in every community is that the group of relational supporters, which we've described in some of the other webinars, the closest to supporters, those folks who come along and are most deeply aligned, those folks who spend their time, their money, and their good name with you, they will come along as you build better relationships in your community too. These networking opportunities networking leads to these opportunities that you might not have had without these relationships. So how do we want to prep for them? First off, the prep starts with what do you want? And this is the key driver, of course, to the agenda. Your agenda as a place of intersection with their agendas. What do you want, folks? And I'm going to get into this in a few more slides about how to phrase this. But I want to start not just on the what do you want, but how do we want to present ourselves? There's a few different points in this that I think is important from a coaching perspective. Going into a better relationship, better communications space, we need to do it with an attitude of openness, with an attitude, again, to Ken Haycock's rules around respect, an attitude of excited engagement, the attitude that says, while I might be a little bit introverted, I am willing to put myself out there in order to cross a bridge, get out of my silo, go have a cup of coffee with another person. The attitude also around co-creation and learning in an eager way what the other group, the other individual has to offer. That part of the prep there is sometimes having to psych yourself into it, to be honest. Not every conversation do I have the energy for. Not every engagement is easy. Sometimes you gotta really work on yourself. And we all have different ways to go back to the well to find that sort of strength. But it's very important when we're talking about the big ideas that include the funding formula for your library, the funding that puts people to work, the funding that brings in the collections that supports the community, to start with the right kind of attitude around it. Body language in these kind of conversations, there's a little bit of schmoozing that needs to go on, to put yourself in a posture where you are open, where there is warmth, where there is a kind of human interaction that is not standoffish. That body language matters a great deal. And it's important for us to think through how we work differently at a reference desk, differently at a board table, than we would over a cup of coffee with a potential colleague. The other thing to think about here is that sometimes we have, well, I'm using business cards as a shorthand for this, but there's a lot of times where I work with librarians, with library leaders, with even board members who say, I'm not comfortable going out. I have a bit of an imposter syndrome. And I want to be able to root this next bit of advice in my favorite movie, if I could. The Dread Pirate Roberts, those of you who've watched The Princess Bride, maybe once, maybe 100 times, like some of us on this webinar have, the Dread Pirate Roberts, so it's the scene, if you haven't seen it, don't worry, it's been out for 25 years, I'm not spoiling anything. It's the scene where Buttercup and Wesley have been reunited after the fight or after the Battle of Wits with the Sicilian. She pushed him down the ravine. She yells, "I hope you die." He says, "As you wish." As he's falling, she throws herself after him, and then they meet each other at the bottom of the ravine. They kiss. It's the boy in the story is all like, "Oh, it's gross," and she says, "How could you be marauding as the Dread Pirate Roberts? You've only been gone for 5 years. He's been out there for 25 years." And Wesley, the Dread Pirate Roberts, says, "I'm not the," says that tells this wonderful story that the Dread Pirate Roberts that he was working with had grown so rich that he wanted to retire. And he told Wesley a secret. He says, "I'm not the Dread Pirate Roberts." He said, "My name is Ryan. I inherited the ship from the previous Dread Pirate Roberts. Just as you will inherit it from me. The man I inherited from was not the real Dread Pirate Roberts either. His name was Cumberbund. The real Roberts has been retired 15 years and living like a king in Patagonia." What happened in that movie and what happens with the business card is very powerful. The business card, in number 3 there on the screen, regardless of your own sense of security in these conversations, your own sense of imposter syndrome, the business card that has the name of your library on it carries with it not just your job title, not just your role at the library if you're a volunteer or a library board member, but it carries the dignity and purpose of that library and every single other library out there. It's extraordinary. You are the Dread Librarian, Karen. It is a moment of realization, I hope, that says, yes, you're not only representing yourself, but you are embodying this institution that is perhaps even bigger than the institutions that you're talking to on the other side of the table. You have a right to be there, folks. So as we prepare ourselves, we're going to be talking about the pitch. How do we have these conversations? Again, a little reminder about the genuine nature of things. We are not looking to go out there and attempt to talk somebody into something that isn't appropriate for them. And to realize also that you have a lot to offer, not just from the library, but from the other relationships that you already have in place. One of the inventory pieces that I like to do with people when I'm doing one-on-one coaching around building better local relationships and better communications is asking these couple of questions. To say that you're at the nexus of things, that you're a connector already. What community groups do you belong to already? Where do you live and where do you spend your time? These just personal characteristics. Okay, I'm a bookworm. I don't really go out. Well, that's cool. I get it. But what do you like to do? What are your commonality? What are your common points of interest with other people? The big question that I always have also when it comes to these sorts of networking activities, who do you know who knows everybody? And every single librarian that has ever worked a desk knows somebody who knows everybody because they're in the library talking about everybody else. And in this day and age also, if we might not necessarily be as out there in front, Where are your online communities and what forums do you participate in as well? I want to surface all of this as a way to say, again, that you have a great deal of legitimacy, not just in the job title that you have, but in what you bring to this thing from an interpersonal perspective. All right, back to the agenda. What do you want and from whom? Because if we're going to be out there having nice chats, that's kind of a cocktail party. What I'm talking about here is cups of coffee, more strategic meetings, the chance to sit down and talk to the rest of society, the folks who run the organizations, staff the agencies, and are themselves stakeholders in the big things that happen in your hometown. There are only two reasons, and we've been through this on some of the other webinars. There are only two reasons for you to ask for anything. One is to scale up or replicate your success, or the other is to mitigate or fix a failure. What do you need with this agenda conversation that would map to and be complementary to the people that you have a great deal of respect for on the other end of your conversation? And I never let anyone go out for a cup of coffee without answers to these 5 questions. What is the actual problem you're trying to solve? And it might be an internal problem to the library. It might be an external problem to the population. It might be a systems problem within the way the library is structured or the funding formula. It might be a problem with the way that the community itself is aligned. But what population or part of the community is affected by the problem is the place where agenda development, forgive me, agenda intersection begins. Because those people who you're talking to on the other end of a Ken Haycock style conversation are going to have a focus on either a population or a place, whether it's the whole hometown or a particular type of your place. The intersection agenda, sorry, the intersection points of your agenda start with realizing where the problem that you're trying to solve, who or what part of the community is affected by it, and how will they, meaning that population, or more abstractly, the community in general, be impacted by a positive change. The positive change certainly has either money or people attached to it. So, what is the ask in these conversations that you're looking to have, these better relationships you're trying to build, that will help you solve that problem, help them solve a problem because they have a commonality? They have a commonality. And then I start not with asking first, who are you going to go talk to? But based on this logic model, what are we trying to solve in terms of a problem? Who is affected or what part of the community is affected? How will change positively impact them? And then what specifically needs to be done? Money or people, buildings, programs, authority to act. Then it leads to, is that the right person to have this conversation with? Who do I need to ask to solve this problem? Otherwise, it's a complaint. The coffee the cup of coffee that you have, the glass of sweet tea, the chance to sit down and have a chat in a very polite and respectful fashion, you might be off of your target. But if your target is properly in place with these questions, then the next step in the prep work is, what do they, the person that you are looking to talk to, do they already identify your problem as a relevant to them problem? It gets back to the Ken Haycock rule about agendas, and what people love or like is what they are paying attention to. Do they see this problem as a relevant problem to them? If they do, it's a much easier conversation. If they don't, you actually do not have an agenda setting opportunity. What you have is an education opportunity for them if they still have the authority or the ability to help you solve your problem. Why would that individual, that group that you're talking to, why would that organization, agency, or stakeholder group, why would they want to see this problem solved? And very specifically, your prep work before you ever go and send the first email to say, hey, we're over here at the library, we want to have a chat. The prep work that you need to do before you make the first knock on the door, before you pick up the phone, before you ask somebody to make a referral, what are you asking them to do? What are you asking them to do at this stage of the process? Perhaps with an eye towards what is the big thing that you're asking them to do at the end of the day. You have to be able to think through as part of your prep, how will that individual or that group do that thing that you're asking them to do? And when is that able to be accomplished? And I bring that up for a couple key reasons. A lot of organizations have a budget cycle. They have commitments already based on their strategic plan or their strategic priorities. Government agencies, grant makers, they all have stakeholder groups that do donations. They all have a cycle, and your cycle versus their cycle needs to be properly understood. When are they able to do that thing, and how will they accomplish it? There's other webinars that we're doing in the series that talk a little bit more about elected officials, or about programmatic partners, or about funding partners. Each of them have their own nuances, especially in the elected official space. And we'll get into that in more details with some of the other webinars too. But when is a real key issue, because sometimes the when becomes a real stumbling block. Yes, we want to talk to folks early enough in order to have these foundational conversations to establish that the agenda is in common, that there's an opportunity to co-create and commit. But when is a decision possible for them based on their own timelines? There's a little bit of a coaching worksheet here for you about thinking through this based on the thing that you want. A few slides ago, what do you want? You want collections? You want more staff? You want a better building? Who is going to be impacted, or what part of the community is going to be impacted? What your target is, who the audience is, and then a description of how it is manifest, either with the shared value system, the shared mission, the shared vision, the common agenda. If we're working together, it means that we can. If we're not, it means that individually we won't. All right, so very brief section here, because I've given this to you in another slide deck, in another webinar session already. But the inventory, yes, we have our own personal preparation work. We have some visualization that goes on in anticipation. I'm going to get into some more assumptions in just a moment about how do we do that more effectively. But this covers the organizations, agencies, and stakeholder groups just as a really brief inventory. There's 7 different areas of society, generally speaking, that we like to think through together whenever we're working in a particular community. And we always are very happy to work with you individually as a library leadership team, or you as a library leader, on thinking through who to talk to about what and when. The educational partners, it's a fairly comprehensive inventory. It goes everything from pre-K in center-based and home-based childcare to before school, after school, and out of school, to college and career readiness. But it's about who else runs the rest of the wraparound that isn't addressed by a public library. The social welfare and religious groups, the inventory in your community. And again, this could be for old friends, this could be for new friends. But the big question on social welfare and religious is who else cares about the same populations? The governmental partners that we have, who else cares about how we're putting a small amount of smart tax money to work? Who in some places might be more competitive? Who might be more additive when it comes to that small amount of smart tax money, whether it's the parks or public safety or public works? Where are we overlapping and competitive with our services? Where are we complementary? The civic partner list is fairly extensive in some communities. In other communities, it's a little lighter because of the size of your community. I get it. But we've got either traditional infrastructure, whether it's rural or agrarian, whether it's faith-based, but more of a social and civic infrastructure rather than ministerial. The folks who do scouts and band, the folks who do arts and culture, the folks who do, I mean, it covers the waterfront. Are these old friends? Are these new friends? And are you looked at, especially on the business partner side of things, are you looked at more as a service provider than what you truly are? In the smallest library in North America, you are a community anchor institution. Your hours matter to the retail community. You are an economic driver. You are part of the whole cloth approach to workforce and biz dev, and do they know that? And in particular, are the conversations that we're looking to build better around focused again on what those folks who are on the other side of the conversation like and love. Now, it is incumbent upon you sometimes to correct misinformation or to update, and we've got a lot of coaching in this webinar series about how to do that. The idea of getting to co-creation around solutions, though, starts with understanding what these folks are doing for a living, the same way you're doing the work for a living. Then the politician side of things, and we have another webinar on this area of dealing with elected officials, supporting elected officials, understanding their constituencies as the key point of agenda intersection, and then the media as well. The media, this comes back to the way media is done in bigger places. There's actual media in every place. There is social, as well as what we can refer to very lovingly as the local gossips, the local networkers, the local connectors. Just going through that inventory real fast, because I don't know who you're looking to talk to, but I want to talk to you about how we can make some assumptions about what it means to send that first email and say, dear Jeff, I understand that you run part of society. I want to have a chat with you about the people that I care about, or the people that you care about, the community that we both call home. So from our perspective, what we do when we're not sure who we're talking to, they have the right kind of job title, they have the right kind of service profile. The other organization, the other agency, the other stakeholder group looks like we should be talking to them. We heard about something that they did. It looks like it's either going to be high impact, or maybe it could be better if we were actually doing something together. They made us raise our eyebrows in some ways, but we don't know them. And when we don't know them, it is very important. And I introduced this in another webinar session earlier. When we don't know them, it's very important for us to make some assumptions. What we like to use is a variation on the message box exercise, which is called a Tully message box. You can use it to develop outbound messaging for everything from email and advertising and social, communications around blogging and writing, even correspondence. And I take a page out of the opportunity to use it for correspondence and for business communications to say that we can make some really good assumptions based on how the message box exercise works out about doing introductions, about making an overture, about reaching out to somebody that we're just not sure if we're right in our hunch that they would be good to talk to. There's 4 quadrants in the box. In fact, I like to fill it out by hand sometimes in these boxes, and we ask ourselves 4 questions about the target. And as Ken Haycock said in one of his rules, the target needs to be talked to about what they love, what they like, who they are. We have to bring our work to them at the point of agenda intersection. These 4 questions that we have some details to them that I want to share with you now, because it might help you write better emails, make better phone calls, ask for a referral, and then when you get to the follow-up on it, you got something to say that's coherent and cogent and engaged and interesting. What do we say about ourselves? That's the first part of the questions that we have when we're doing a message box exercise. What do we say about ourselves in relation to the audience and in relation to the topic? Now, if it's education, it might be one thing. If it's a social welfare group, it might be another. If it's a business community, it really depends on the kind of business that they're in. Are they in a service business? Are they retail? Is it one of your real estate agents nearby? What do we say about ourselves in relation to that audience? Who do we want to go talk to about what? And how do we put ourselves in a position, either alongside, behind, in opposition to, and in relation to the topic that we want to cover? What do we love about that audience or about this topic, this population that we want to serve, this place we call home? What is our love in this kind of a context? And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I mean, sometimes work is not all about love. Sometimes it's about going into work. But the core of our service posture, the core of libraries as a service provider, there's got to be a little love in there sometimes, folks. Are we effective at what we're doing in relation to this audience, in relation to this topic? Are we effective, or are we falling short? And that honest assessment is a real driver for the kind of communication that we're trying to have. The better communication, the better relationships that we're trying to cultivate. Are we at the library a provider of core services, or are we complementary in relation to this audience, in relation to the topic? Understanding where we're speaking from authentically, honestly, and genuinely is a really key driver for success in these conversations, which are focused on co-creation. We're not trying to pitch somebody a service. We're trying to talk to them about how do we make the world a little bit of a better place together. The second quadrant is what do they say about themselves? And this is where the assumptions kick in. And we have to. We have to make some assumptions because we don't know them. We've heard about them. We've seen their work. They've made us raise our eyebrows. Is that organization, agency, or stakeholder group more policy focused or program focused? I always ask that question because if it's a policy focused group, then we have to talk about policy. If we don't, we sound like we're just doing things to be busy. If they're programmatically focused, likewise, how do we get things done? How do they get things done? What do they say about themselves? Are they doers or are they thinkers? Are they a hero about the problem or are they a victim of the problem? What's their tone? Do they talk about themselves and describe themselves in ways that are there to solve problems, or are they there to, in a certain respect, capitalize on problems? If they're a hero or a victim of the problem, there's a tonal quality to that. You can tell. Are they a collaborator or are they a solo actor? And this sometimes is the source of problems when we're trying to build better relationships. If they are collaborative by nature, that is maybe a lower barrier than a group, an individual, a stakeholder, an agency that sees themselves as acting in a solo fashion. The negative side of collaboration is that they can sometimes become parasitic. And the negative side of a solo actor is that they can sometimes be a gatekeeper, or they can be well, if it's not their idea, it's nobody's idea. That said, it's important to know who you're talking to and their philosophy, because if you present yourself, again, in a way that's inauthentic, I'm not suggesting that, but you have to present yourself to somebody with a knowledge of how they're going to receive you. Are they a proactive or a reactive group about the problem? Proactive meaning, are they trying to anticipate it and then put systems in place or do programming or policy that gets ahead of it? Or are they responsive to it? Maybe they're very effective being responsive to it, but they tend to be not rudderless, but they are following the wind. Are they more compassionate in their approach to dealing with humans? Are they more systematic in their approach to dealing with things like policy issues, funding formulas, the the structure of law? To ask, what do they measure? When what do they say about themselves? What, there's a lot of different adages about measurement out there, and we measure what we value. We track what we care about. Yeah. How do they describe themselves? Is it the throughput of people? Is it a throughput of money? Is it a throughput of activity? Fundamentally, when you think about them and considering them as them, what do they love? What do they care about? What gets them out of bed in the morning? Because we have to go into these conversations with some assumptions about that. The fourth quadrant, what do we say about them? This is an interesting quadrant. And this is not, this sometimes is a bit of solo reflection for library leaders. Sometimes it's a group conversation. Do you admire them? This group that made you raise your eyebrows, or are you jealous of them? That's a legitimate place to start from. And it's very important when you're trying to build better relationships, to build better conversations. Where are we coming from emotionally around this? Are we disappointed in them? Did our eyebrows go up because we admired them? Or were we a little bit like, well, that would have been nice if they had come to us first? Seriously, these emotional states are part of our attitude, part of our prep work I mentioned earlier. How are we postured to relate to them? We have to be willing to think that through in a very visible kind of way. Are they effective? What do we say about them? Oh, they look very effective. I don't know, they could do better. And have we seen them around, or are they low profile? Meaning that we've noticed them for an awfully long time, or they have been either newly and not newly on the scene, but they've put their head up in a new way. When we really think about them, it's very important for us to be honest about this with ourselves because uh, our our um, our biases and our assumptions here might need to be questioned. All right, the fourth quadrant. What do they say about us? I sometimes find this to be a very free-floating anxiety moment. Sometimes what do they say about us is that they don't say anything about us, and that's a moment of professional humility. It's also perhaps just a moment of professional anxiety, and I come back around to the Dread Pirate Roberts. Yes, there's us as the particular library, but then there is the big us of libraries. Do we think they know us? Is a big question here. Are we being imposters? Are we in the background or are we out front? Do they see us as a core service or a complementary? And is their understanding of us possibly outdated? Are they underinformed? Um, I hate to be negative with this one, but most of the time, it's a way to kind of exorcise, if you will, some of our internal concerns or even our little demons about our own self-worth. But what do they say about us is important to know ahead of time going in. The prep on this, it helps us understand whether or not we've got to do a lot of education, a lot of orientation, or if we can meet them perhaps as a peer right away. Because what we want to get to is that place where we are peers with that other organization, that other agency, or that stakeholder group. What we would, excuse me, then do in terms of our prep work is to take the time to write down what we call a 2793 message. What do you want to tell them? Based on those four areas of interest, along with your agenda, what do you want to tell them in 27 words? It has to be short. It's about a tweet, about three-quarters of a tweet. If you want to get up to 33 words, I'll let you do it. It has to be delivered very quickly. And the reason it's 27 words in 9 seconds is that we want to know going into that first email that we send what our objective is. We have to transmit a little bit about us and a lot about what we love and ask them if they love it too. What are the three things we want to tell them in that very short amount of time, that very short moment of engagement? We can go on and on and on about our programs and services all day long. In fact, the library does 12 million things for 12 million populations. I'm looking for you to talk to one of them with this communication. All right, let me show you how that works in real life, and then we can talk later about your own particular need set here. We can spend time, and part of our relationship with the state library is to do coaching calls and to do one-on-one calls. My contact information is at the end of the webinar deck. I want to be able to do this with you one-on-one for your particular place in your particular terroir. But here's how it looks. Educational stakeholders as an example. Why do we want to talk to them? The three big things that come out of our message box is that we think of them as natural partners, especially with after school time. When we work together, there's lots of leverage because we've thought through on the message box where our place is in relation to each other. And we can best address the challenges for our kids together, which is really how do we put ourselves in that relationship matrix in a very positive way. And then when we surface some of our free-floating anxieties, sometimes it's difficult to partner with us at the library because of time or other barriers that they have. The education stakeholders that we are assuming something about, yeah, they're probably super busy. Their follow-through is going to be poor. And that they may look at us when it comes to our out-of-school time, our pre-K work, even as a threat. It's an interesting moment to be able to condense those four different quadrants into something as simple as this, and then write that 2793 to be able to put it together in order to titrate down what are we up to that is that common agenda. We partner with parents and teachers to prepare children for school and to extend the school day through independent learning discovery. We help extend budgets, we do after school right, and we want to be collaborative. It is our top level goals for that conversation that we're looking to have. Okay, so let's talk about having coffee then. We have ourselves a message box. We've gone through and thought this thing through. We have a target audience in mind. We've spent the time doing prep. Let's sit down and have a chat. And whether you drink coffee or not, I don't care. I'm just using it as a hook here for sitting down and having a conversation with another adult who runs part of society. Leaving your building. Leaving your building is absolutely essential to having better relationships, better conversations, more successful relationships that move your agenda forward because you've made it a part of somebody else's agenda. Please work with me to make a plan about how to reach out and contact these folks utilizing these tools that I've described. The face-to-face nature of this, especially coming through COVID, especially with so many Zoom meetings, the yield on face-to-face time is so much better than anything else that we can do. And I know that you're understaffed. I know that it's going to have to be time taken away. It also might be, when I say leave your building, I do like it to be on somebody else's turf, or at least a third-party neutral place. But maybe it's an invitation to come and see the place as well, though it should not be the litmus test. Um, creating and sharing a single comprehensive document for your leadership team as you're doing this in order to pay attention is not crass. It's very important. Who do we talk to about what? What do they have to say? Where are points of intersection? How can we move this agenda forward in common? What we want to track, and I have a worksheet for you that you can download, is these 5 things. The bright spots that happened in your conversation. Good stuff. People wanted to talk about things that matter. Pardon me. People want to talk about things that matter. There's a good path forward. Things feel good with this conversation. The hot spots that come up also need to be recorded. When I had this conversation the other day with so-and-so who runs a pre-K site, they identified a big problem or a small problem that could be emerging. These hotspots are vital because they can disrupt our agenda. They can also get in the way of good co-creation. One other thing that you want to record is blue skies, because if it is a first time meeting and somebody says, well, you know what? I never thought about that about the library. What if? What the blue sky concepts here, like, oh, what forgive me, blue skies and what ifs, they're somewhat interrelated. I always stumble over this part of my slide, but blue sky is like, let's put a plan together that's really huge. And what if we move things forward a little bit tactically together? And then who else? Who else is a big thing to record, but you have to solicit it. You say, Jerry, Karen, this was a great chat. Who else should I be talking to that you know? Tell me about the people that you're a part of a nexus with. Tell me about the folks who run other parts of society that I don't know already. Who else cares like you do? How can we have a bigger conversation about these ideas that are going to matter to people? Who else does what you love to do too? So if you need a slogan, if it'll help you get out of your building, if it'll help you go off and have those conversations, well, I just want to throw a couple here just to brainstorm with you. This isn't an official campaign that we're doing. This is just some ideas. If you need to get out of the building and you need to put a post-it note up on your mirror, let's go co-create fresh ideas for stale problems. You need to talk to your board about this. You need to get them moving. Collaboration is the ultimate innovation engine. If you need, your staff is stuck. They need to think it through with somebody else who does something that they used to love, and they're just stuck right now. Inclusive solutions for complex challenges, or from conflict to consensus if it's a fraught time in your community, or if you're just tired of talking to yourself in that mirror. Dialogue, not a monologue. Folks, I hope this was an interesting session for you. I wanted to spend a little time with these tools. The download that I have for you has some of these worksheets, but my contact information is on here. And that's really the key element. How can we help you think this through for your particular place and get into building those better local relationships, the better communications, the more effective ways to talk to other humans about the big ideas. I do love what I'm doing here with you, and I hope it shows because I want to see you succeed. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your agenda as things progress. Thanks for being with me today.